Trump just committed an act of war and a crime of aggression. Right? That's what you have many saying after he ordered a blockade on sanctioned oil tankers going in and out of Venezuela. With him writing on Truth Social last night, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. And adding, it will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before until such time as they return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. And saying the illegitimate Maduro regime is using oil from these stolen oil fields to finance themselves, drug terrorism, human trafficking, murder, and kidnapping, the Venezuelan regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization. And then, after announcing that in no uncertain words he was ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela, Trump claimed the illegal aliens and criminals that the Maduro regime has sent into the United States during the weak and inept Biden administration are being returned to Venezuela at a rapid pace, saying America will not allow criminals, terrorists, or other countries to rob, threaten, or harm our nation, and likewise will not allow a hostile regime to take our oil, land, and any other assets, all of which must be returned to the United States immediately. So, a lot to unpack there. And so before we even get into what is actually true in what he said, let's start with the blockade and the responses to it. Because Trump's order, it could seriously hurt Venezuela's economy, which heavily relies on oil exports primarily to China. And so among the Venezuelan officials slamming this, you had the country's vice president saying, Venezuela in national unity condemns Donald Trump's military threat and will defend its rights of free trade, navigability, free development, sovereignty, and national independence. Right, and that is stateside, you had people like Representative Joaquin Castro writing, naval blockade is unquestionably an act of war, a war that the Congress never authorized and the American people do not want. And adding, on Thursday, the House will vote on a resolution directing the president to end hostilities with Venezuela. Every member of the House of Representatives will have the opportunity to decide if they support sending Americans into yet another regime change war. Also with this, I'll say Trump's choice to label Maduro's government as a foreign terrorist organization, that has sparked a lot of reactions, including confusion. And that's for a number of reasons, including he already gave that designation to Cartel de los Soles, with Trump arguing that it's headed by Maduro and people in his government. So to many, it was unclear if he was just referencing that or if he was declaring a new terrorist group. But as some reports have explained, giving that label to the government specifically, it would create more of a pretext for direct military action in the country and pave a way for U.S. personnel to sanction, stop, or seize any vessel carrying Venezuelan oil. Which then, on the note of oil, you have tons of people questioning Trump's claims that Venezuela stole U.S. oil, land, and assets. And there, you have many saying that's just an outright lie, though others have said it is an incorrect assertion. But where the reports largely agree is that Trump seems to be referencing Venezuela's choice to nationalize its oil industry a few decades ago. And a number of experts have argued that Venezuela's natural resources do not belong to the US. But still, you have people in Trump's administration like Stephen Miller using this justification, writing, American sweat, ingenuity, and toil created the oil industry in Venezuela. Its tyrannical expropriation was the largest recorded theft of American wealth and property. These pillaged assets were then used to fund terrorism and flood our streets with killers, mercenaries, and drugs. Also, with everything going on, there's a question of how does this impact the American oil companies still in Venezuela? And well, if you look into it, the only one left is Chevron, and it's the only one continuing to operate after decades of changes, and they have a special license from the government to operate there. And Chevron, at least so far, is suggesting that they're not impacted by Trump's order, with a spokesperson saying, Chevron's operations in Venezuela continue without disruption and in full compliance with the laws and regulations applicable to its business, as well as the sanctions frameworks provided by the US government. And really, they seem to be trying to stay out of this, saying any questions about the security situation in Venezuela should be directed to the appropriate authorities in the US government. So definitely what happens between Venezuela and Chevron is something we're gonna have to keep eyes on. But all of this, it comes as Trump's been spending months and months building pressure against Maduro. You have Trump threatening strikes in Venezuela. The military has conducted multiple airstrikes on boats in the Caribbean, often near Venezuela, and those have killed nearly 100 people, and many argue that those attacks have been illegal. There's also been an increase in US aircrafts in the region. And while the official on-paper motive from the administration is that this is a drug crackdown, many believe that, this is really just about regime change in Venezuela. Now, or maybe it's always been, apparently oil. It brings us back to just yesterday in that wild Vanity Fair piece with Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, where she told them Trump wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. And so with that, you had senators like Chris Murphy seeing that quote and arguing, so not a war on the cartels, it's regime change. Either way, totally illegal and nonsensical. For now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens and what Trump does from here. What do he call himself? The peace president? How disrespectful to FIFA. They made up a whole fucking peace prize for him, and this is what he does? It kept him busy for what, like an afternoon?